On the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, that's a week-long celebration. The feast itself lasts for a week, but it's preceded by the Passover, which happens on the day before the following week. Now, I'm not going to get into the details of the timeline of this crucifixion sequence yet. We still have two more Gospels to go through. So as we go through Luke and John, there's long been controversy and debate over what day of the week this actually happened. Of course, this is Good Friday right now, today, in our calendar today, March 29, 2024. And so the church has kind of settled on Friday as having been the day of the week of the crucifixion. Which seems to me to be accurate, because the way the burial narrative is structured, it seems as though they had to get him down from the cross before sundown on Friday, which would be the end of the day and the beginning of the Sabbath day, which the Sabbath day was Saturday, and they could not work on the Sabbath, so they had to get him down. He died at 3 o'clock or so in the afternoon on Friday. They had only a couple of hours to get him down from the cross. They had to go to get the permission to get the body. And they had to get it down and put it in the ground, put it in the grave, before sundown, because that would be the beginning of the Sabbath day, and they couldn't do it on the Sabbath day. So, and then the Sabbath day he was in the grave. And so it seems like he was crucified on Friday. But there are some people who say he was crucified on Thursday, because that would make it a full 3 days that he was dead, 3 days and 3 nights, Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. And if he's dead on Friday, he's only dead for Friday and Saturday nights, and he said he's going to be dead in the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. So some people say he was crucified on Thursday, and there's a lot of questions about the timeline of this week, because we know the events up through Tuesday, and then we don't really read anything about Wednesday unless the Lord's Supper itself happened on Wednesday, and the crucifixion was actually on Thursday. But like I said, the church has settled on Thursday being the day of the supper, and Friday being the day of the crucifixion. We'll talk about the timeline, and it is, very weird. There's a lot of, but we'll talk about the timeline later, because we're only halfway through the Gospels. We still have Luke and John to go through. So for now, we'll just say this is Thursday. Anyway, the feast itself is a week long, but this is actually like the beginning of it. The disciples came to Jesus and asked, and we'll find out later this was specifically Peter and John doing this, "Where do you want us to make preparations for you to eat the Passover?" He replied, "Go into the city to a certain man and tell him, 'The teacher says, my appointed time is near. I am going to celebrate the Passover with my disciples at your house.' So the disciples did as Jesus had directed them and prepared the Passover. And there was a lot they had to do to prepare this Passover. After they got the house, after they got clearance to go into the house, they had to sweep the house of all impurities. They had to clean it. They had to ritually purify it. They had to remove all the leaven from anywhere in the house. They had to arrange the furniture a certain way. They had to prepare the meal a certain way. It was very elaborate. Now, these men would have been doing this every year of their lives, okay? Peter and John are the two in particular. They would have done this. John is probably still a teenager. Peter could be a young adult in his late 20s, maybe early 30s by this point. But they would have done this every year. It would be automatic to them. They would have had no difficulties doing it. Because, again, the text just says they did it. Okay, like they would have had, there was a lot they did. Like, there were numerous things they had to do to make the preparations, but they would have been doing this every year of their lives, and it would be second nature to them. When evening came, Jesus was reclining at the table with the 12. So they would have had a small table. Well, I say small because it would have been close to the ground. A short table. Big enough to hold 12 men around it, of course. But so it was not a small table in that regards. But it's not a table like we think of tables. Like they were sitting at a restaurant table. Okay, no, they were sitting on the floor. It says they were reclining. It means that they were actually lying on the floor, leaning up against the table like this. That's how they ate. So there was a short table that was near the floor, and they would have been sitting on the floor, leaning up, reclining on this table. So when evening came, Jesus was reclining at the table with the 12. And when they were eating, he said, I tell you the truth, one of you will betray me. They were very sad and began to say to him, one after the other, surely not I, Lord. Not me, I said. I don't have a thought in my mind to betray you. What are you talking about? Jesus replied, the one who has dipped his hand into the bowl with me will betray me. Of course, they all had done that because they're all eating bread out of the same bowl, or dipping it out of the same sauce or whatever it was they were doing. So this in itself doesn't tell them anything because they'd all been doing that. The Son of Man will go just as it is written about him. But woe to that man who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better for him if he had not been born. Then Judas, the one who would betray him, said, surely not I, Rabbi. Jesus answered, yes, it is you. Now we'll read more about Judas's departure in the Gospel of John. In fact, John will give us a lot more information about this whole sequence. The accounts of the Last Supper we get in Matthew, Mark, and Luke is very abbreviated. They did and said a lot during this Last Supper. So we'll know. So Judas leaves, okay, and then they have another long conversation and prayer, and then they go out to the Mount of Olives. And apparently Jesus is talking to them along the way. But we'll read all about that when we get to the book of John. So while they were eating, so presumably Judas is left by this point. And we'll read about that when we get to John. Jesus took the bread, gave thanks, and broke it. He gave it to his disciples, saying, take and eat. This is my body, representing his broken body, broken on the cross. Then he took the cup, gave thanks, and offered it. This is a cup of wine here, of course. Gave thanks and offered it to them, saying, drink from it, all of you. This is the blood of the new covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. Now, this covenant has been talked about before. This is the covenant that Jeremiah promised. Back in Jeremiah, let's go look at Jeremiah here. Jeremiah 31. The time is coming. This is Jeremiah 31, starting in verse 31. The time is coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. It will not be like the covenant I made with their forefathers, when I took them by the hand to lead them out of Egypt, because they broke my covenant, although I was a husband to them, declares the Lord. This is the covenant I will make with the house of Israel after that time. This is the covenant that Jesus is inaugurating here, declares the Lord. I'll put my law in their minds and write it on their hearts. I will be their God, and they will be my people. No longer will a man teach his neighbor or a man his brother, saying, know the Lord, because they will all know me, from the least of them to the greatest, declares the Lord. For I will forgive their wickedness and will remember their sins no more. Ezekiel 34 also refers to this covenant. After talking about the shepherds of Israel not doing their job, so God himself will become the shepherd and do the job. Ezekiel 34:25. I will make a covenant of peace with them, and rid the land of wild beasts, so that they may live in the desert and sleep in the forest in safety. So this is the covenant that they have been hearing about since about the days of the fall of the previous temple. And now Jesus is here to initiate it, to inaugurate this new covenant. I tell you, I will not drink of this fruit of the vine from now on, until the day comes when I drink it anew with you in my Father's kingdom. I don't believe this has happened yet. Some people might try to interpret this spiritually, saying he's doing it today when we take the Lord's Supper. But Paul, explaining the Lord's Supper in 1 Corinthians, says in 1 Corinthians 11, verse 26, whenever you eat of this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes, which indicates to me that the full meaning of this statement, I won't drink it again until I drink it with you in the Lord's Father's kingdom, is yet future. I believe he's referring to the feast, the wedding feast, that we read it depicted in several places in the Bible. That's going to happen when all the people of God are united in the kingdom again, literally and physically. We read about the parables of the wedding feast. We'll read about the wedding feast in vision form in Revelation 19. I believe that's what he's referring to here. That day when all the people of God are gathered with him at the marriage supper of the Lamb, that's when he's going to drink of this fruit of this vine again. When they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives.